The first sound I heard that day wasn't the gentle ripple of the pool, or the morning coffee machine, it was screaming. Pure, chaotic, high-pitched screaming that hit my ears before I even finished tying my robe. Chlorine-scented air mixed with total panic. There she was, Penelope "Penny" Sinclair, the undisputed queen of the Twin Oaks Homeowners Association, thrashing in my perfectly blue water, her expensive highlight job plastered to her face, clawing at her arms like she'd been dropped into a jellyfish tank. Around her, half a dozen of her community guests were scrambling out, slipping on the wet decking, scratching their skin until it was red and blotchy. The pool itself looked calm, almost mocking them, a pristine, turquoise mirror reflecting the morning sky. I just stood at the patio door, a glass of iced lemonade already in my hand, watching the whole scene like it was a private performance I'd paid good money for. Penny locked eyes with me, her face contorted, scarlet with fury and irritation. "You did this, Ethan," she shrieked, voice cracking. "You poisoned us. I'm calling the county sheriff." I just took a slow, deliberate sip of my lemonade, met her gaze, and said, as softly as I could manage, "Funny. I don't remember sending out the invitations." The sirens began their mournful wail almost immediately, echoing down Elmwood Lane. Neighbors started peeking through their pristine, manicured hedges, their eyes wide with disbelief as the flashing red and blue lights painted my quiet backyard into a surreal crime scene. Maybe, I thought, maybe true peace finally has a cost, and it's a hell of a show. But to understand this ridiculous spectacle, you have to know where it all started. My version of the American dream wasn't a yacht or a penthouse, it was just quiet. A quiet backyard, a blue pool that reflected the sky, and enough space to breathe after 20 years in the commercial real estate rat race. When I moved into Twin Oaks, it felt like I'd found it. It was perfect. Manicured lawns, clean sidewalks, the kind of place where you thought, finally, I can just relax. For the first few months, I did. I'd come home, fire up the grill, take a dip as the sun went down, and feel the tension just melt off my shoulders. My backyard was my sanctuary, a small kingdom of silence. Then, one Sunday morning, the illusion cracked. I stepped out with my coffee, half asleep, and saw two teenagers, a boy and a girl, maybe 16, splashing around in my pool, laughing like they owned the place. I was confused, not angry, thinking maybe they'd wandered in. But the girl waved, super casually, "Morning, Mr. James. Mom said we could swim here since it's a community amenity." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" That's when I heard the voice, sharp, commanding, and dripping with self-importance. Penelope Sinclair, HOA president, standing right on my driveway with oversized sunglasses and a clipboard, like it was a magical scepter of authority. "Oh, Ethan," she chirped, that fake, wide smile already plastered on her face. "I am so sorry. The kids must have misunderstood. They just thought, you know, since we're all part of the same HOA, it's sort of a shared space. Right?" I forced a chuckle, which felt more like a cough. "Except it's literally fenced, attached to my house, and I pay for the maintenance, Penny." She just waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, of course. I'll make sure they know, next time." Those two words, next time, should have been my warning. But I let it go, figuring it was a one-time mistake. It wasn't. Days later, I came home to music blaring from the backyard. The Sinclair kids were back with 3 friends, floating on my inflatable swan, sipping sodas. "Hey, Mr. J. Your pool's awesome," the boy yelled. And there was Penny again, appearing from behind the hedge like a sitcom villain making her grand entrance. "Ethan, I was just telling them to wrap it up. You know how kids are." "Penny," I said, trying to keep my voice polite but firm. "This is private property." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. I completely understand." She didn't understand at all. Within a week, it was a routine. I'd come home to wet footprints, towels draped over my furniture, and empty snack bags floating in the skimmer. One time, her husband, Charles, a man who wore cologne so thick it choked the azaleas, was sitting by the pool with a lukewarm beer. "Hey, neighbor," he grinned. "You've really got this backyard thing figured out. HOA should give you a medal." I managed a stiff smile. "Or maybe they should just get you your own pool, Charles." He laughed, missing the point entirely. I tried everything, locking the gate, polite notes, even texting Penny reminders about property lines. Her reply was always the same: "Oh, Ethan, don't be dramatic. We're neighbors, not strangers." But people like Penny don't respond to kindness. They feast on politeness. The more I gave, the more she took. Then came the letter. Tucked neatly in my mailbox, sealed with the HOA's blue emblem, notice of violation, aesthetic disruption and noise complaint. I read it 3 times. It claimed my pool activities had caused excessive noise and visual clutter inconsistent with HOA harmony. The kicker. It was signed by Penny Sinclair, president of the Twin Oaks HOA. She had weaponized the system against me, using the very chaos she created as evidence. I almost laughed. I walked over to her house that evening. She answered with that same smug smile. "Oh, Ethan, did you get the notice? Nothing personal, I assure you. Just standard enforcement. We all have to follow the rules, right?" "Right," I said, my voice dangerously even. "Even the ones about trespassing." Her eyes flickered just for a second, but she recovered quickly. "Don't be dramatic. We're just trying to keep the neighborhood peaceful." That night, sitting by the silent pool, I realized I was done being the HOA's punching bag. Penny saw kindness as weakness. So, I started documenting everything with my new security system: footage, timestamps, every piece of trash. At first, it was about proof. But the longer it went on, the more I realized that logic wouldn't stop her. Only humiliation would. The following weekend, I overheard Penny bragging to another neighbor about the community gatherings at my pool. "Ethan's space adds so much value to the neighborhood," she said, loud enough for me to hear. "We practically consider it communal now." Communal. That word hit me like a slap. By the time the sun set, I knew I was done playing nice. I didn't shout. I didn't confront her. I just smiled and waved back, like nothing was wrong. Inside, a different kind of project was brewing, not frustration, but a deep, focused creativity. If Penny wanted to turn my backyard into a public pool, I'd make sure her next visit was unforgettable. I cleaned the pool, replaced the filters, checked the chlorine. Everything perfect, nothing suspicious. Revenge, I've learned, doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be quiet, patient, and perfectly timed. The final straw came on a Saturday afternoon. I'd been stuck in traffic, dreaming of a quiet swim. But when I turned the corner onto my street, my driveway was blocked by 2 SUVs. And from behind my house came the unmistakable sound of splashing, laughter, and truly dreadful pop music. I followed the noise, and what I saw nearly made my blood boil: at least 20 people in my backyard. Penny was lounging on my deck chair, sipping a margarita. Charles was grilling on my barbecue. Kids I didn't recognize were screaming, cannonballing into my water. I stood at the gate, frozen. "Hey, Ethan." Penny called out, dripping with fake cheer. "Hope you don't mind. The kids wanted to have a little fun while the weather's nice. We'll clean up when we're done." "Penny," I said, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "You are on my property. Again." "Oh, relax," she waved lazily. "We're all neighbors. What's the harm? You have such a big heart, and such a big pool." For a second, I thought about losing it, about screaming. But then I took a deep breath. Yelling wouldn't change anything. People like Penny don't understand boundaries. They only understand consequences. So I turned around, walked back into the house, and grabbed my laptop. I opened the HOA bylaws I'd downloaded weeks ago and started taking notes. Section 4B, Property Access, Section 11F, Trespassing Liability. I was smiling as I sipped water from the fridge. While they partied, I recorded everything. When the sun started setting, the crowd thinned out. Penny gave me that sugary, rehearsed smile. See? We kept it under control this time. Sure, I said, calm as a lake. Just remember what you said. What did I say? She tilted her head. That you'd clean up when you're done. Her smile faltered. By the time they left, my pool looked like a swamp. That night, I didn't sleep. I edited the footage, every trespass labeled, every timestamp clear. I wasn't angry anymore. I was methodical. The next day, I received another HOA notice, this one claiming I was creating visual disharmony by having excessive pool activity visible from neighboring homes. The woman who turned my backyard into Club Med was now accusing me of causing a disturbance. That was the moment something in me snapped. Not in rage, but in focus. I went into my shed and checked my security setup. Everything was in place. But that's when the other idea crept in. I opened my laptop and typed, "Itch powder pool harmless prank." A harmless, devilishly effective powder that caused mild skin irritation, especially in water. It wasn't toxic. It wasn't permanent. It just made people itch like crazy. Perfect. I ordered 3 packets, the kind used in college pranks, and waited. The package arrived Thursday morning. Plain brown box, discreet. Inside, 3 small bags of fine white powder. Looked like sugar. Felt like victory. Saturday afternoon, the weather was perfect. And right on schedule, the noise started across the street. Penny was hosting another community pool event, my pool, of course. At 6 a.m., before the chaos began, I stepped outside with my coffee and my little brown box. I walked to the pool, sprinkled the powder gently into the water, and turned on the filter jets. It dissolved instantly, invisible. Then I went back inside, made breakfast, and waited. Around noon, the laughter, the splashing, the bad music began. I peered through the blinds. There they were. Then came the first scream. "Something's biting me." A woman shouted. Another yelled, "My arms. They're on fire." Kids started crying. Adults splashed toward the edges, scratching furiously. Chaos erupted. Penny shot up, covered in red blotches, screaming at Charles, "What did you put in the water?" I stepped outside casually, glass of lemonade in hand, just in time for the full spectacle. People slipping, screaming, the once communal pool now a war zone of itching chaos. Penny locked eyes with me, fury blazing. "You did this," she shrieked. "You poisoned us, Ethan." I took that slow sip. "You mean my private property? The one you broke into, again?" Her jaw dropped. "You'll pay for this," she screamed. I tilted my head. "You mean like the last 6 months of unpaid HOA dues you owe?" The look on her face was priceless. Shock, rage, disbelief. As she grabbed her phone to call 911, I turned to go inside, not to hide, but to wait. Because I knew the fun part was about to begin. When the police cruisers finally pulled up, lights flashing red and blue across the blue water, I was sitting calmly on my patio chair, legs crossed, watching the mayhem unfold. Penny's guests were still panicking, running across my lawn, rubbing their backs against my fence post. I took a slow sip of my drink. It was almost poetic, all that chaos echoing off the calm surface of the pool. Penny stormed toward the officers, her perfect hair a tangled mess, her expensive sundress soaked through. "Officers," she shouted, voice trembling between outrage and hysteria. "He poisoned us. He put something in that water. She pointed at me as if I were a serial killer. I stayed perfectly still. "Good afternoon, officers," I said, calmly. "You might want to ask them why they were in my backyard in the first place." The tall officer frowned. "Sir, is this your property?" "Yes," I said, handing him a printed copy of my deed, which I conveniently kept in a folder by the patio door. "Everything inside this fence line is private." Penny's voice rose an octave. "Don't listen to him. I'm the HOA president. We have rights to shared amenities. The water is visible from other homes. He can't legally keep it to himself." The officer blinked slowly, trying to process her logic. He turned back to me. "You got that on camera, sir?" I smiled. "Every second." I led him to my tablet and pulled up the security feed, 4 different camera angles, clear as day. Footage of Penny's family hopping my fence, unlocking the gate with a copied key, and hosting their full-blown pool party without my consent. "Well, that's pretty straightforward," the officer grimaced. Penny went pale. You can't just," she stopped when the second officer approached, radioing, "Dispatch, confirming trespassing on private property. Multiple parties involved." Her friends started to scatter, embarrassed, like fugitives clutching towels. "Sir," the officer asked me, "did you put any chemical in the pool?" I nodded calmly. "Chlorine, yes. Standard maintenance levels, same as every Saturday morning. You can test it if you like." He radioed for a test kit. 10 minutes later, the results came back: no harmful substances detected, just normal chlorine and trace minerals. The silence that followed was delicious. Penny stood there, trembling with anger and total humiliation. You planned this," she spat. I shrugged. "You planned the party. I just kept the cameras rolling." Before anyone could react, she lunged forward and slapped my shoulder. It was pathetic, really, more of a flailing, desperate swipe, but it was enough. The tall officer immediately grabbed her wrist. "Ma'am, that's assault," he said, firmly. "Calm down or you'll be placed under arrest." "He's the criminal," she screamed. The second officer moved in, cuffing her hands behind her back. "Ma'am," he said, reading her rights, "you're being detained for trespassing and assault." Neighbors were openly gathered now, recording on their phones. I leaned against the fence, watching it all. For months, Penny had humiliated me, twisting the rules, turning my home into her playground. And now, in front of everyone, the Queen of Twin Oaks was being escorted to a patrol car in handcuffs, barefoot, dripping wet, and covered in red blotches. I'll admit it, I smiled. I raised my glass to her as they put her in the car. "Already regretted letting you swim, Penny." The door slammed, and the cruiser drove off. The silence that followed was the sweetest I'd heard in months. You'd think that after being handcuffed and dragged out of my backyard, Penny would have learned her lesson. But people like her, people who think rules exist for everyone else, they don't learn. They retaliate. The very next morning, I found a bogus note taped to my mailbox, pending HOA investigation for property hazards. Cease use until further notice. It was stamped with the HOA logo and written on her old letterhead. The woman had been fired from her position less than 12 hours earlier, yet here she was, still trying to pull the strings. I crumpled it up and laughed. But my revenge wasn't just about payback. It was about elegance. I found a local event service that rented out private spaces for photo shoots. I sent in pictures of my pool, polished tiles, string lights, shimmering water. Within a week, I had bookings. My backyard wasn't just private again. It was profitable. As fate would have it, my very first booking, an engagement photo shoot, happened on the exact day of Penny's disciplinary hearing. I watched from my deck as the photographer and a genuinely lovely couple set up. A few hours later, I heard a car door slam. Penny had returned from her hearing, and by the look on her face, it hadn't gone well. She marched across the street, heels clicking like gunfire, and shouted through the gate. "What is this? You can't rent out your property. It's against HOA policy." I stepped outside, waving cheerfully. "Afternoon, Penny. Board meeting go well?" Her eyes flashed. "You can't turn your pool into a business." I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "Actually, according to Section 3G of the HOA Charter, which you wrote, by the way, there's no restriction on private event hosting under 10 attendees. You might want to reread your own bylaws." Her face turned beet red. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped, realizing she'd literally signed the rule herself years ago. "I'm just charging admission, Penny," I smiled. She sputtered, unable to find words. Then, with one last glare, she stormed off again. Over the next week, bookings kept coming. Every time a car arrived, Penny peeked through her curtains, fuming silently. Then one day, a realtor's sign appeared in her yard, "For sale by owner." The gossip confirmed it. After losing her HOA position and facing multiple fines, Penny was drowning in debt. Her pride wouldn't let her stay where everyone knew her downfall. But the final twist came from the County Financial Crimes Division. Remember that anonymous flash drive I sent? The detective showed up and informed me my evidence had helped them recover over $90,000 in stolen HOA dues. Then he handed me a property record. At the top of the page, he said, "It reads, Property Foreclosure, 281, Elmwood Lane. New owner, Ethan James." I blinked. Wait, what? Her house went up for auction, and due to my prior claim for damages from the trespassing, the bank accepted my bid automatically. The woman who'd once claimed my pool as her community property had lost her house to me. The irony was so perfect, I had to laugh. I walked through her empty house that weekend. The walls were lined with old HOA plaques and motivational quotes like, "Leadership starts with confidence." I walked into her backyard and stopped. From this angle, I could see my pool, my deck, my patio, perfectly framed through the fence line, the same view she'd used to justify calling it a shared amenity. Standing there, I realized Penny hadn't been my enemy. She'd been her own. Her pride, her control, her need to dominate every inch of life, that's what destroyed her. I didn't turn her house into a rental. I cleaned it up, fixed the garden, and turned it into a guest suite for friends and family. I called it the Blue Haven Annex. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the result of standing your ground. Victoria had built her kingdom on control. I'd rebuilt mine on boundaries. And in the end, that made all the difference. As the crickets hummed and the night breeze carried the faint scent of chlorine, I whispered to myself, "You finally made this place better, Penny, just not the way you thought." I raised my glass one last time, looking out at the water. No more HOA letters, no more power plays, no more Karen wars. Just me, my home, and the water, still clear and finally, truly mine.